We cannot lose this war. We simply have to win. What Russia's ambassador to the UK admitted to me today about the cost of Moscow's war with Ukraine.
Yes, Ukrainians have got some square kilometers during the counteroffensive, but it is all repelled back right now. I cannot deny that the war cost a lot, and this year we have a certain very low percentage of growth.
Andriy Kilin spoke to me after Ukraine struck an oil refinery and a naval base inside Russia and ahead of a key financial summit. Shortly afterwards, he was summoned to the Foreign Office, but he had a lot to say about the end of the war and Moscow's relationship with London. Our conversation is coming up.
I wouldn't say angry. I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon.
After that sweary phone call, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu break cover. But was this really just a tactical disagreement? And breaking news tonight, MI5 and the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance are warning of a Chinese spying plot on job sites like LinkedIn. Our security and defense editor will explain how it works. And a 5,000-year-old Iceman and the ancient bacteria discovered still living inside his body. Find out what that could mean for the future of science. Coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Russia's war effort is stalling. Its economy is barely growing. It's losing more men on the battlefield than it can send to war. And today, as its second city, St. Petersburg, prepared to host a flagship business summit, Ukraine sent in missiles. That happened to be the day when I sat down with Moscow's man in London. He's a diplomat used to spinning the facts to suit his government's agenda. But the Andriy Kilin I met today was more frank and open than he's ever been about the state of the conflict. I'm going to share the key moments of our conversation in a moment, but before that, just listen to this.
You are being sold a raw deal. Men like you who join the fight, you won't be trained. The equipment they'll provide you is substandard. There is a very high chance you'll die or be wounded while you're out there. And the odds are that if you are wounded, you will be left to suffer in the mud and die.
It's the NATO Secretary General there speaking directly to possible Russian recruits after he met Ukraine's leader in Kiev. Russia is losing territory and soldiers, and that's where I started my conversation with their ambassador to the UK. Just have a listen.
Situation has changed. Yes, Ukrainians have got some square kilometers during the counteroffensive, but it is all repelled back right now. There is a movement, probably not that fast. It happened last May, last June, and all of this. We have a war of drones. It is well known. Situation is changed every day. But what I can say is that there are new developments here. Of course, Ukraine is now getting drones from Western countries, which has now a production over there, quite a numbers. But still, we have huge resources of drone productions. And in any event, we will dominate in this thing. What I also would like to say about that there is a new phase, unfortunately, in this war, since Ukrainian troops have started to target civilian objects in Russia. Last night, they have targeted civilian bus, 7 killed, 11 wounded. The most striking case is, of course, this college in Starobelsk, where there were attacks by 16 Ukrainian drones in 4 waves. So they killed 21 youngsters and enormous of people. I guess more than 60 has been wounded. It is pure civilian issue. So we have to do something about that.
And you're denying that the Russians have been targeting civilians over the course of the last few years? I mean, the death toll of targeting of civilians over the month of April in Ukraine has been one of the highest since the conflict has begun. Hundreds of civilians have been killed. In fact, the drone attacks that are taking place across cities in Ukraine by Russia, targeting civilians, has gone up. Is that a tactic of terrorizing the civilian population because
No,
you
we
are
do
not
not.
moving forward on the front lines?
We do not. We do not terrorize at all. As all newspapers has published, we have a huge attack the day before yesterday on Kiev and Dnipro. But how many civilians died? 6 of it. At the same time, we have destroyed
The Ukrainian
10
reports are saying something completely
Kiev,
different.
in Kiev.
Just in Kiev, but across the
Just in
country,
Kiev.
over 80
Across,
civilians were killed,
18
over 100
together with
wounded.
Dnipro. But in Kiev, we destroyed 10 military production facilities. 10. In Dnipro, 3 also military production facilities. And in a region of Kharkov, 201 major. They're huge. So we targeted it with ballistic missiles. But civilians losses are very small over there.
Several hundred were killed over April, according to reports. But, Ambassador, in previous years, we've never spoken about the scale in which the Ukrainians are targeting infrastructure deep inside Russia. This has also changed and frankly shifted in this war as well. The Ukrainians now have capabilities where they are targeting inside Russia. St. Petersburg was hit. We know that targets in Moscow were hit. Oil refineries continue to be targeted as well. So when you say things have shifted, they have also shifted to the benefit of the Ukrainians in this conflict.
There is a huge difference because we do not intentionally targeting the civilians over there. As for Ukrainians, they do it intentionally. It is civilian infrastructure, oil refineries.
We've talked in the past about the number of civilians, and I've been in Ukraine where homes were hit in certain areas. I've gone deep
Am I
underground.
interviewing you or you're interviewing me?
But I'm letting you know that when you say
let's
Russia doesn't intentionally kill civilians, several hundred were killed in April alone, the highest civilian
I haven't seen
target
these ciphers.
since this war began. And I have been in Ukraine where civilians have been killed.
No. Yeah, that's a tragedy. I'm sure that's a tragedy. And Ukraine can stop this war immediately if they will withdraw from the Russian regions over there.
Russia can also stop this war. In fact,
to
President
finish
Putin
yes.
on Victory Day last month said that this war is coming to an end.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Very simply, he has deciphered this later on and has said, given the situation on the ground, he believes that the war will come to an end pretty soon. But we will, of course, prefer diplomatic and political means to achieve our goals, negotiation process and so on, and we will achieve it. But if this will not happen, then we have to achieve it by military means, unfortunately.
So Russia's ambassador to the UK. Let's just pause for a moment and take stock. An admission there that things aren't going exactly as Russia would like. That is, that this is a war of drones and that President Putin believes the conflict will end soon. Because how long can Russia realistically fight on after 4 years of sanctions and extravagant military spending? Well, before I bring you more of that conversation, here's what Ivor Bennett has been finding out in St. Petersburg.
Russia's economy is under pressure, and it shows. Closed cafes and shuttered shops are everywhere.
I'm in St. Petersburg on the main street, and all along here you see signs like this one. It means to let, and it's evidence of yet another business that has gone bust.
Across Russia, more than 200,000 small and medium-sized businesses closed their doors in the first 3 months of this year alone, as the cost of war in Ukraine piles up. Anastasia used to have 3 flower shops, but recently had to shut one because of growing costs and wilting demand.
Неприятно, очень больно и обидно.
It's unpleasant, very painful and frustrating. Right now, there are no growth opportunities, no opportunities. I can't imagine any such opportunity at all, not a single one. Our utility bills have tripled just to add to the absurdities. Honestly, you have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur in 2026.
In beauty salons too, things are far from pretty. A rise in VAT to help fund Russia's war has increased tax bills by as much as 80 times, and many can't survive. The industry predicts a third of its businesses will fold by the end of the year.
I survived the 2008 crisis, 2014, the pandemic, the beginning of mobilisation, the beginning of the special military operation, and I can say that there's never been a crisis like this. This is the most difficult period for Russian entrepreneurs, the most difficult.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine had previously helped grow its economy. Massive military spending outweighed the impact of Western sanctions. But after more than 4 years, it's getting harder to afford. Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries are hitting the Kremlin's war chest, and the economy has begun to contract. The spike in oil prices due to war in the Middle East has given Moscow a boost, but experts warn it's not enough.
Russian economy is like a climber who's stuck above 8,000 meters. It is the altitude which mountaineers call the death zone. At this height, the human body cannot survive for long. It consumes itself faster than it can recover. And what we see with the war at the Gulf is that it provided Russian budget additional funding, additional oxygen, but it wasn't a game changer. So it's not brought this mountaineer from the death zone to the safe space.
And it's not just businesses seeking salvation. Consumers are too.
The prices for eggs, milk, meat, pasta, bread, everything has gone up.
Feels like it's been 10 to 15% over the past half a year.
Naturally, we'd like things to get cheaper. In general, as my grandmother used to say, I wish the war would end soon.
The government argues the slowdown is to be expected and supposedly normal after a period of high growth. But there isn't much about Russia's economy that is normal anymore, and its problems are becoming difficult to ignore.
Well, Ivor mentioned the impact of that other war in Iran. The spike in oil prices is helping to boost Russia's war chest, but it's not enough. Russia believes it's fighting an existential battle against the NATO security alliance, and it's determined to fight on, even if money is running out. Just have a listen. Is this a war against NATO, between Russia and NATO?
It's an existential war for us, not for NATO countries, because otherwise we have had a chance just to lose our influence, our country, our role in the world. It is for us an existential war. In fact, it is being done, yes, against NATO countries, probably without the United States. But initially, of course, the United States participated very actively in it.
The United States is still offering support to Ukraine, aid packages. President Zelensky has asked for more Patriots. They've asked for more support. Intelligence is there from the United States as well.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. So that it is just additional strength for the other side. It is, anyway, so we cannot lose in it. We cannot lose this war. We simply have to win it. That is why we still continue to do it.
But what does winning now look like 4.5 years into this war?
No, it has been explained.
Tens of thousands of Russians killed.
It has been explained many times. I'm not speaking about how much has been killed or something like that, but it is, we have to liberate lands on which Russian population lives. It is just that Russians over there should live free and safe.
We are now seeing inside Russia not just drone attacks, refineries hit. We know that your naval fleet was hit as well by the Ukrainians several times. This war is impacting Russia in a bad way as well. In fact, its economy has contracted. Russia's economy is being impacted. And now there are senior Russian officials telling Vladimir Putin, your president, that he cannot continue to invest in this way and in the manner that he has in this war.
I cannot deny that the war cost a lot, and this year we have a certain very low percentage of growth. It is, well, in comparison with UK growth, it is quite the same, I will say. But altogether in 3 years, it was 10% of growth of GDP. Yes, Ukraine has put strikes on our refineries quite a lot, on our exportation facilities. Tonight, St. Petersburg, Ust-Luga, Novorossiysk, and the others, but But we learned how to re-establish it, how to make it back. And I say exportation of oil in May has exceeded exportation of April, March, January, and so forth. So it's the biggest exportation, by the way.
Why?
Because we learned how to deal with that.
The Russian economy, there was actual growth in previous years, and you were making gains on the battlefield. But you have to admit that things have shifted with the economy and with your gains on the battlefield.
Well, I haven't said it before. It is nothing new in it, of course. War costs quite a lot of money, and we have to get this money, so to supply it, to continue, yes. And but as I have said, it's just a repetition. But the economy is not failed. It is continuing to do. Well, we have, of course, dealing with money now. The central bank is lowering the level of borrowing. What is called in English? Anyway, inflation is not high, so we.
Inflation is high. Taxes have increased.
Inflation is 6%.
People are being impacted directly as a result of this war, and they don't understand what it is for anymore. The Russian population.
I think that the population purely, absolutely understand what it is for. It is not for territories. It is for people. It is for people that speak Russian, live Russian, understand Russian, and do not live together with Ukraine.
Let's go straight to Moscow now and speak to our correspondent, Iva Bennett. And Iva, you know, I've spoken to Andriy Kilin a number of times over the years, and frankly, I haven't heard him be so frank. But one of the things that he said to me quite early on in that interview was that there is this narrative being built up in the West, in Western media, that somehow Ukraine is making gains and Russia is on the back foot. But it's not a narrative. It is the reality on the ground as well.
Yeah, and I think he almost admitted that, really, didn't he? I think it was an extraordinary interview, unbelievably frank, as you say. I think it's the first time I've heard a senior Russian official admit that the war in Ukraine is not going to plan. As you say, you've spoken to him many times before. We're used to hearing him say the usual Kremlin lines that Russia's forces are advancing, a Russian victory is inevitable, but not this time. It was much more blunt. The line that really stuck out to me was, the war has cost us a lot. A really, really extraordinary admission. And I think the question is, why is he saying this now? Why now? And I think the answer is because the cost of war has now become so great, it's impossible to ignore. You've seen in my report the number of businesses that have gone bust here in St. Petersburg, and I'm not in Moscow, I'm in St. Petersburg, I should correct you. The prices in the shops are going up. The drone attacks are happening more and more frequently, further and further from the front line. There was one overnight here in St. Petersburg just hours before this flagship economic forum opened. There are these incredible images of delegates arriving for the forum this morning with huge plumes of thick black smoke rising above the city behind them. Really extraordinary, a reminder of why Russia's economy is in trouble. And because of all this, there is, I think, a growing discontent here in a way there hasn't been before. And I think the Kremlin realizes it has to acknowledge that. That's why Vladimir Putin said recently, of course, that the war is going to end soon. But does that mean he's suddenly going to capitulate? Very unlikely. There is still defiance. You heard the ambassador say that Russia must achieve its goals, whether diplomatically or militarily. So on the one hand, they're saying, yes, we know the war needs to end, but at the same time, they're saying it's still on our terms.
Iva, we'll come back to you in a moment, and I just want to take our audience back to our interview with the ambassador, because I just want to focus now on Russia's place in the world and how Russia feels about the support Ukraine is receiving from the West. We're getting reports tonight that the UK, Germany and France are drawing up a plan to engage Vladimir Putin in negotiations. I'll get Iva's take on that in a moment, but just let's go back to that interview with the ambassador. Are you surprised, though, with how enterprising the Ukrainians have been, whether it was drone production within their own country, the fact that they're able to target deep within Russia as well? Has that surprised Russia, the Russian government, your leadership?
It's a means, it's a new mean, of course, new instrument in just outsourcing production to various countries, including United Kingdom, Denmark, what was Canada, and others. This kind of outsourcing, it is just make vulnerable these countries. So at some point, if they continue to do this, so we have to find some countermeasures. I'm not speaking about which. But we know the addresses. We have published it publicly, and it will be easy targets.
When you say countermeasures against these Western European
I am not going
countries,
to decipher this, but believe me, we will find ways in case it will be needed. At the moment, there is no need in it, but they can be taken.
Does that include the UK?
Why not, of course. If Ukraine is supplying Ukrainian army with armament, yes, it will be including UK. It is just, we are on different sides of this story with the United Kingdom. United Kingdom is doing everything to destroy, as they say, to make a strategic defeat of Russia.
European countries are now talking about negotiations, mediation with the Russians. Where does that leave the UK in those conversations? Because you have, talked a lot, even in the past, about the UK's role in its support with Ukraine. How does Russia view the UK's role when it comes to these sorts of negotiations, mediation with Europeans?
European countries are talking about something, we know that, but we do not see any preparedness for serious negotiation.
Well, Donald Trump has also expressed frustration with Vladimir Putin, with the Russians, for not negotiating in good faith when he has attempted for the last year or so to bring not even bring the Ukrainians, frankly, to the table, which has been very frustrating for the Ukrainians, but to talk directly with President Putin. And frankly, the feeling has been that it's actually the Russians who are not approaching this with good faith or wanting this conflict to be resolved.
The attempt by President Trump in this field was very modest. Just one meeting with President Putin, some mediating efforts, and he switched to the other things at all completely. I wouldn't say that we do have contacts with Americans. There are special channels for it, and we continue in exchange. But at the moment, he is completely dealing with Iran issue, because I would say that there is different dimension of this conflict. Iranian conflict and the Middle East is a worldwide situation. And this is a pure European issue, what we do have with Ukraine.
If we talk about the war in Iran, you've talked about previously it being an illegal war, unjustified. Talk to us.
It's good that you remember that.
Well, many say this about Russia's position as well in Ukraine, that it's illegal, it's unjustified, it's provocative.
It's justified and non-provocative.
Well, when it comes to this war, but when you've talked about the war
about Iran,
but with the war in Iran, will Russia continue to provide support to the Iranian regime? To what is Russia's position in terms of where things stand with Iran at the moment?
About Iran, we are in contact with Americans. The issue is that this is talks between Iran and the United States. We are not part of this conversation and integral part of this conversation, and we do not want to integrate into this conversation. But whatever compromise will be found, we will be supportive if it will lead to a long-term peace over there and stability.
And you think that Russia can rebuild its relationship with the UK?
In a distant future, perhaps, but not with this government.
That was Russia's ambassador to the UK speaking to me a little earlier. Well, let's go back to Ivor, who joins us live from St. Petersburg. And Ivor, just listening there to the ambassador, I asked him about these potential negotiations with the Europeans. We're hearing a little bit more about that, and we're likely to hear more from Vladimir Putin in the coming days.
Yeah, so these reports tonight have come from Bloomberg, which is reporting that Britain, France and Germany together are discussing plans to hold joint peace talks with Kyiv and Moscow in a bid to end the war. According to the reports, they see that Ukraine has the momentum right now, and they're basically trying to cash in on that. Now, we haven't got confirmation of that ourselves yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case, because even last year, I think the UK and Europe were growing pretty frustrated and exasperated with the peace process led by the Trump administration, of course. They felt like their interests and the interests of Ukraine were being sidelined. And now with the US now solely focused on events in the Middle East, peace talks have completely kind of frozen and stalled. So it seems like Europe is trying to take matters into their own hands, feeling like they are the ones holding the cards, sensing some weakness from Vladimir Putin. Would he engage with this? Well, I think he has certainly dropped a few hints recently that he's open to talks with Europe, but it's still very much on his terms. For example, he recently suggested the name of Gerhard Schröder as a potential mediator, former German Chancellor, of course, close Putin ally, but for Europe that's a non-starter. I think Vladimir Putin is still hoping that Donald Trump would re-engage, because that represents the kind of best possible outcome for Putin, potentially unlocking billions of dollars of American investment. And interestingly, there is a US official here at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum for the first time in several years, I think since 2018, certainly since the invasion of Ukraine. His name is Rodney Mims Cook Jr., Donald Trump's fine arts commissioner, the man in charge of his controversial White House ballroom extension. Not exactly a senior figure, but still a sitting member of the administration. That's interesting, and it shows that these contacts with the White House and the Trump administration still exist. And I'm sure Vladimir Putin will be asked about all of this both tomorrow and Friday. He's got two big events, interviews with the heads of news agencies, then his big speech to the forum. So it'll be very, very interesting to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, and Ivor, thanks so much for your analysis. The ambassador did say to me a number of times throughout that interview that the channels with the Trump administration are open and they continue to have dialogue with them. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, still to come on the programme, why the UK and its intelligence partners have issued an unprecedented joint alert over China. I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Let's go to breaking news now and a warning tonight from the UK and its Five Eyes intelligence partners. They say China is using popular job networking platforms to ensnare government and military personnel and anyone else with access to top secret information. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes explains how this new spy plot works and why security services are so worried.
It's being described as an unprecedented joint alert by the 5 intelligence sharing countries, that's the UK, the US, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. The alert is being called like safeguarding our secrets, and they're basically accusing the Chinese military intelligence services of using online recruitment platforms and networking sites like LinkedIn to target individuals in Five Eyes nations that have access to privileged information, classified information, so government personnel, military personnel, and also academics, journalists, and they talk about how they're using what they described as aggressive recruitment strategies to try to get these people, sort of lure them in. So posing as your Chinese spies, posting fake adverts on these platforms, looking for sort of foreign or defence analysts or something like that. And then as the relationship is developed, they'll be encouraged to provide more interesting, sensitive information in return for payment. And the payment would be, according to this alert, hundreds to several thousands of pounds. And the alert is very specific about how it might not be classified information that you're sharing, but any kind of information used by the Chinese intelligence service could then damage the respective countries or undermine government policy, give away information about military locations, put lives at risk. And it really makes the point that any kind of interaction like this, is a serious breach. You could have, there could be criminal consequences, losing security clearances. In the past, it must be said that the Chinese embassy here in London has denied all allegations of spying.
Yeah, I mean, Debs, it's clearly an issue for them to now try and create some kind of structure or framework around this. Separately, though, and I guess in many ways linked to all of this, I wanted to ask you about Alex Younger, the longtime MI6 chief who has sadly passed away.
So the Times is actually running his obituary, yes, he is a much-loved former head of MI6, one of the longest-serving. He served for 6 years. Normally a term is for 5. When Alex Younger was the head of MI6, it was at a time when the James Bond movie Spectre came out, and I was told that it was there was a viewing inside MI6 headquarters, and you had a number of the actors that were there, including Ralph Fiennes, who was asked by one of the audience, and the audience, I was told, were all kind of intelligence officers, who's your favourite James Bond? And apparently Ralph Fiennes said, obviously Daniel Craig, I guess he probably had to. And other people on the stage were all sort of praising Daniel Craig as being the best James Bond. And then Alex Younger apparently turned the question round to the person that asked it in the audience and said, well, who's your favourite James Bond? And before this person had a chance to reply, apparently somebody else in the audience quipped, you, sir. And I think that really does underline just the love, the affection, the respect that Alex Younger had amongst his peers and his colleagues.
That was our defence correspondent, Deborah Haynes there. Now, there's supposed to be a ceasefire in place between the US and Iran, but that hasn't stopped both sides from trading strikes. This is Kuwait airport today. Authorities say Iranian drone and missile attacks killed one person and wounded dozens of others. The US is denying reports that one of its missile interceptors caused some damage. In Lebanon, Israeli attacks continue despite that phone call full of expletives between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Today, both men confirmed that strong words were exchanged. Have a listen.
Did you speak to him in those terms?
I did. I wouldn't say angry. I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon. You know, at some point I said, we got to stop this. We got to stop it.
So we have common goals. Sometimes we have, as in the best of families, you have these tactical disagreements. We always find a way to work them out, and we do so as great friends. We can disagree in the morning, and by the afternoon we have common action.
Let's bring in Jeremy Scahill, editor of the online investigations outlet Dropsite News. Jeremy, really good to see you. I just want to begin by asking about that phone call and leaks around that phone call. Both men have come out now and said, look, strong words were exchanged, but we work well together. I just wonder, though, you know, these leaks around these phone calls, ultimately in the past as well, we've heard Joe Biden say that he famously, it was leaked that he described Benjamin Netanyahu as an arsehole. And frankly, we've heard Donald Trump be quite harsh and firm with Benjamin Netanyahu, but that hasn't really changed the reality on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, this is kabuki theater, to be quite blunt about it. I mean, the reality is that Benjamin Netanyahu and the entire project of Israel are at the apex of their colonial agenda. They have never had a better position than they have right now with Donald Trump. You see Netanyahu has moved his forces north of the Litani River, and they're engaged in a scorched earth war in Lebanon. They are continuing the genocide in Gaza. They control more than 60%. Netanyahu's saying now we want 70%. Ultimately, we want to get to 100%. They succeeded in getting the United States into an all-out war with Iran. So, you know, Netanyahu and Trump engage in this kind of theater, but at the end of the day, Israel's agenda is being completely facilitated by Donald Trump, as it was facilitated by Joe Biden, for that matter.
And Donald Trump is actually speaking live at the moment, and he's talked about the fact that there is progress in the talks with Iran, and we're likely to see more progress over the coming days. You continue to speak with Iranian officials. Just tell me what you're hearing from that side.
Yeah. I mean, over a week ago, what I understood from Iranian officials is that the basic contours of a memorandum of understanding had already been agreed to, and the mediators told the Iranians that Trump said that he needed time to manage domestic political situation in the United States. What does that mean in real political terms? It means that Trump is on the bad ship quagmire, and he's in a very, very bad position. The Iranians, in an unexpected way, fought back against the United States and fought them to a ceasefire standstill. They asymmetrically took control of the Strait of Hormuz. Their ballistic missile capacity remains largely intact, despite the fact that the U.S. War Secretary and Trump repeatedly said that it had been wiped out. The Israelis gave cooked intelligence to the Americans. They facilitated the Americans getting into this war. And the deal that Trump is going to make is going to be largely on the terms that Iran wants. Trump is saying, oh, our great victory is that the Iranians are never going to acquire a nuclear weapon. That's been Iranian policy for decades. There was a fatwa issued by the late Supreme Leader. Trump is fabricating a victory narrative because the reality is he waged a war based on lies, and he was fought to a standstill by a country that said openly, we're going to light up the Middle East, we're going to hit American military bases. They did exactly what they said they were going to do. The Iranian track record on stating what they're going to do and then doing it is quite good. It's Trump who's erratic and is saying, on the one hand, we're going to wipe out their civilization. We're going to erase a multi-millennia civilization. On the other hand, he says the Iranians are begging us for a deal. It's very clear that it's Trump that desperately needs an off-ramp, and the Iranians haven't budged on their core red lines. They just haven't.
And what we could potentially see, for years, Donald Trump criticising the Obama deal, the Obama nuclear deal with Iran, the JCPOA, what we could see is one that isn't even a one-pager in comparison to what that was, which took several years to develop.
Yeah, I mean, the Iranians broke this into two tracks, and I think objectively it was quite wise what they did. They said, we want to bring an end to the war. We want to negotiate the Strait of Hormuz. We want the ceasefire to be applied regionally. That's a real wild card here because Netanyahu has dramatically ratcheted up the killing in Lebanon, the Iranians unexpectedly, I think from some analysts, said this is a red line for us. We're not going to accept this scorched earth bombing to continue. We'll see what happens. You know, Netanyahu has a PhD in violating ceasefires. The term ceasefire has been used as a surrender cudgel against the Palestinians in Gaza. You know, no one talks about this. The Palestinians signed a deal with Israel. Israel has violated every single day, killed 1,000 Palestinians, has moved deeper into Gaza. They say, oh, Hamas agreed to disarm. Hamas never signed a disarmament agreement. Now this so-called Board of Peace is demanding that the Palestinians surrender their liberation cause as a condition for Netanyahu to abide by the terms that he signed. They signed a ceasefire with Hamas, not with children in tents that they continue to burn alive, and yet they're killing the very people they signed a ceasefire with. So what does that mean? It means international legitimacy stamp has been placed on Israel's war of annihilation. So the Iranians are aware of this as they go into it. They understand they're dealing with an erratic, mentally unstable American president and an Israeli leader who openly talks about a war of annihilation, not just against the Palestinians, but in the region.
And just today, Donald Trump said on a podcast that, in fact, his unpredictability works for him in these negotiations. I want to bring in, just want you to listen to this. I just want to play you something from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, who spoke to our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, after visiting a nuclear site damaged by strikes. This is his warning to both sides of the potential dangers. Let's just have a listen.
This benefits no one. No one. It's not only unconscionable, but it does not bring any military advantage. Radiological accidents are transboundary in nature.
And of course, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Absolutely, yes.
What are we talking?
Well, you know, in the case of a really radiological incident, we would be considering evacuations, with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. And of course, socially speaking, you can imagine the impact, the panic, the socio-economical damage.
It's Rafael Grossi talking about the dangers of hitting these nuclear sites. I mean, Donald Trump is saying that a deal could be possible, progress is being made. Are you hearing, though, that is it more pessimistic than that?
Look, I do take the Iranians at their word when they talk about flexibility on the nuclear issue. The second part of what Iran is talking about is trying to come to an arrangement with the United States that would guarantee long-term that there isn't going to be a war again. I don't think that the mainstream of Iranian leadership actually is interested in acquiring a nuclear weapon. What it makes it more likely is the fact that they're being attacked by two nuclear powers. And I think the Iranians look at Israel as the most destabilizing force in the region. I think much of the region views it that way. And no one ever talks about the fact that it's Israel that actually does have nuclear weapons. So I think that if there's sanctions relief, if there's repatriation of frozen assets, if Trump actually does what I think is unlikely but restrains Netanyahu, I think that Iran has shown itself to be a quite rational actor. Now, of course, if there is a settlement, the next phase of this is that the Israelis, the Mossad, the Americans are going to try to go back to January and encourage an uprising and instability that now they've openly admitted that they were arming and encouraging at a time when they were saying this is just Iran mass murdering nonviolent protesters. So I think that there is a way that Israel views some advantage here to the war ending because they want to try to then go back to the more covert aspects of their war to destabilize, if not overthrow, the Iranian government. At the end of the day, Iran has shown itself to be a nation of institutions, and the killing of the supreme leader and much of the leadership show me an example through history where a nation suffers that kind of decapitation strike of its entire leadership and then fights off two nuclear powers for weeks on end and emerges at the end of it in pole position in negotiations. There is no modern historical precedent for that. The world, led by the United States and Israel, underestimated the Iranians. And I think that Iran is a highly educated, sophisticated society that actually doesn't have an interest in being in an overt conflict. Their survival depends on it, actually.
And for the regime, frankly, the only thing that they needed was to stand and survive, you know, in terms of this war. But I've got a couple of minutes left, Jeremy, and I wanted to ask you about this festival, this conference, this event that you're here, this summit. And yet it's been overshadowed by the fact that it's been a bad weekend for free speech in the UK with two of the guests being banned from entering. Just give our audiences a sense of what's been going on.
Yeah. I mean, the British government, I have to say it quite plainly, has been waging a war against dissent and free speech, trying to stifle criticism of Israel, trying to criminalize pro-Palestinian activism, the case of Palestine Action, the restrictions on speech internally, the banning of people purely on the grounds that they have been critics of Israel is a stunning contradiction to the notion that the British government believes in free speech or believes in a democratic society. It's reprehensible. Now, I come from the United States. The United States is also doing this. For all Trump says about, oh, we're going to end this woke culture, oh, we're going to end cancel culture, they're the greatest purveyors of cancel culture that we've had in American history, and it all goes back to Palestine. So, the banning of Hassan Piker from entering and Cenk Uyghur from entering Britain is not surprising, but it's part of an unprecedented assault on basic liberties by the British Home Office.
And the Home Secretary has said the presence of these two was not conducive to the public good. Are they essentially shielding the public from words when I guess these powers are there to prevent anyone who's trying to incite violence, not using words and free speech?
The fact that the British government takes that position and then continues to lend support to an open genocide being waged by an indicted war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, tells you everything you need to know about this. These are actions that the British government is taking, ultimately at the end of the day, on behalf of a foreign power that is right now, as we speak, burning children alive in tents in Gaza, scorched earth bombing Lebanon, and continuing to try to agitate the United States to continue a war against Iran. I mean, the British government officials in charge of this policy should hold their heads in shame. This has nothing to do with protecting the average person in Britain. This has everything to do with defending the agenda of an openly genocidal regime run by literally an indicted war criminal.
Increasingly, we're seeing this, though. Australia's done it, Germany's done it, the UK's now done it, where they're essentially preventing people from attending conferences and events based on things they say. And they can't really shield their public from this because you can go on social media and listen till, the cows come home to what Hassan Piker or Cenk Turk is actually saying.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a degree to which the attacks against free speech, particularly if the way that younger people look at the world since the Gaza genocide began, the attempt to sort of label anyone criticizing Israel as being anti-Semitic, it doesn't work anymore. It's been overused, misappropriated, and applied in such a broad way in an attempt to criminalize or stifle debate that it's had the opposite effect. The world now is seeing with their own eyes what our Palestinian colleagues died doing, reporting to the world the genocide of their own people. You and I have both talked about this a lot. Some 300 Palestinian media workers have been killed. Anas al-Sharif, one of the greatest journalistic heroes in modern history, was assassinated by Israel. My colleague who worked at Dropsite, Hossam Shabbat, had a bomb dropped on him from a quadcopter and his body was severed in half as he bravely reported and never left North Gaza, the heart of the genocide. Our Palestinian colleagues are the greatest journalistic heroes of our time. And they gave their lives so that the world would understand this genocide. And the British government is supporting that genocide, not just militarily, not just politically, but by trying to crush dissent and free speech that ultimately is aimed at saying our government should be held accountable for their roles in this.
Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Yalda.
Now, let's change gears for a moment. And Otzi, the Iceman, is Europe's oldest known natural mummy. He was killed by an arrow about 5,300 years ago. His body lay for millennia, preserved by freezing temperatures in the Alpine region between what's now Italy and Austria. He's named after the Otzal Valley, where his freeze-dried remains were found in a retreating glacier in 1991. Now, new research has revealed Otzi lives on in some sense. Researchers have identified 3 distinct microbial worlds in his body, including ancient gut bacteria. Joining me now is Frank Matzner. He's head of Institute for Mummy Studies at URAC Research, which is leading this work on Otzi. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Just tell me a little bit more about your research and your findings.
Good evening. Yes, so we aimed in this research to understand better the microbiome still present in the Iceman, and we had here access to different sample materials from the Iceman finding site, but also from the Iceman itself. And this helped us to understand actually who is there, so which microbes are there, And this gave us two major findings, actually. So on the one hand, as you said, the gut microbiome members, which the Iceman carried during his life still. And on the other hand, we saw continuous presence of microbes which are still alive nowadays, and we could cultivate them.
That is extraordinary when you think about it. Something, you know, a mummy that's 5,300 years old, and yet you can still have the presence of what you're describing here, which is giving you more information about that time and this mummy and frankly, how they lived.
Yes, absolutely. I think this information content the Iceman carries is really unique. So we can use this for different purposes. Just think about this gut microbiome, which we can compare now to nowadays gut microbiome. So we see here already very interesting first indications that the Iceman carried a much more diverse microbiome, which we lost over time, which we have not yet anymore in our guts, for example.
Yeah, there is a lot of studies and research being done into gut health today. I guess when you talk about the evolution of that and what we had then and what we don't now, just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, this is definitely a study which helps also modern microbiome research, since these researchers which currently analyze gut microbiomes, they more or less differentiate two lifestyles. So the so-called westernized or industrialized lifestyle, which we are thriving or which we are living in. And then they normally compare this to indigenous populations, so the gut microbiome of indigenous populations. And already there, they saw quite these differences. So these indigenous populations had a much higher diversity of gut microbes. And when we look now back and have the Iceman and also other ancient samples from the guts we analyzed, we see exactly the same. So our ancestors had the same state like now indigenous populations still have. And we interpret this that at a certain time in human history, we lost some of this diversity.
Does it surprise you that you were able to find this microbiome so many, thousands of years later still in the gut?
Yes, it's absolutely linked to the methodological developments we now have in our field. So 10, 15 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. And this means we are really lucky that we have now tools in our hands where we can actually reconstruct with these minute amounts of DNA and with this very highly fragmented DNA, still this very important information.
We know that Otzi died violently. Does this research now help us understand a little bit more about how Otzi, came to the end of his life and that final stage?
This most likely will stay still a mystery, I would say, because we don't know who actually killed him. We know that he was killed by an arrowhead, that he was shot by an arrowhead, but we most likely not can reconstruct these last hours or these last minutes of his life. This for sure still makes the mystery Iceman, this will not be identified also with these new tools.
And I just have about 30 seconds to go, but I guess this is, hugely valuable scientific information that has been revealed. What is the most important takeaway for you?
We can use now this information, especially also the still living microbes, to also adjust the conservation, for example, of this mummy. So we want to keep this information content of this cultural heritage, not only for our generations, but for the next generations. And this is something we are now trying in our next research to really find the best conditions to preserve this body, to preserve this mummy. And this is the next steps we are taking now.
Well, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much, Frank, for joining us here on the programme.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
Now to a former political operator for David Cameron, who's emerged as an unlikely frontrunner in the primary race for California governor. I'm talking about Steve Hilton, who served as the former PM's Director of Strategy. He became known for his role in modernising the Conservative Party, but also his unusual policy ideas like using cloudbusters to make Britain sunnier. He was even parodied in the BBC political satire, The Thick of It. Just have a look.
I'd like to start this session with a question. When is a party not a party?
When it's at your house?
A party is not a party when it is plural. There she is, the party, singular. She thinks like you, she votes like you, she is not you, and yet, of course, she is you.
Just have a look at his political journey.
I think that's one of the reasons that he's been so successful going back many years. I think that he's really in touch with the lives of ordinary people. He cares very much about his constituency work, and he's got a way of approaching politics that is very practical and understands the things that need to be done to improve people's lives.
And I know that some of you may be watching and saying, who is this guy with a funny accent? Thinks he can be governor of California. Well, you know, there was actually an immigrant who was governor of California not that long ago, and I remember when I became an American citizen, that certain governor you may remember. He said, congratulations, he made a very nice video. He said, but Steve, you got the wrong jacket. And I made a pledge that day that one day I would get the jacket that Arnold told me to get on my road to being governor of California, and here it is. I am a proud American. There's the jacket. And I am a very proud Californian. A very proud Californian tonight. Arnold, that was for you.
Well, from Downing Street to California, we'll follow that race closely. That's it from me and the team for tonight. The World is back tomorrow from 9 p.m. Gillian is here next with the wrap. Good night.